Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this week's ZestCast. Just letting someone else in. So for those of you who don't know me, I think actually everybody does, but I'm Rachel McGuinness, the founder of Wake Up with Zest and the Zest Wellbeing Hub. And on these ZestCasts, we interview our expert contributors to the Zest Wellbeing Hub and also special guests. For those of you who were with us last week, I hope you enjoyed last week's ZestCast on men's mental health with Dave Algeo, the stress guru. So if you haven't seen it already, the recording is up on the Wake Up with Zest YouTube channel, but I'll also put the link in the chat box later. But today we are interviewing John Kenny, the relationship guy, and he's going to talk to us about how to understand and create successful relationships. So please feel free to type questions and comments in the chat as always, as we're going along, and I'll be monitoring the chat box. So I may stop John and ask him a question, but there'll be an opportunity to ask questions at the end where you can unmute yourself. So if everyone could be on mute, that'd be absolutely fantastic to cut out any background noise from cats, dogs, kids and doorbells. But John says that his cat might join us as well. So John, thank you so much for being a part of our ZestCast. Tell us a bit about yourself and what you do and how you got to be the relationship guy.
Thanks, Rachel. Hello, everybody. So as Rachel said, I am the relationship guy. I'm a relationship coach, and I coach successful singles who struggle to find successful intimate relationships. So my background is in therapy. Originally, I was a counsellor for many years. The relational stuff was always the stuff that stood out for me, probably because I had a lot of difficult relationships of my own and kind of really connected with the issues that came up for other people. And then when I went into coaching, I did sort of general life coaching for a while. And back in 2016, I decided that I wanted to focus on the relationship side of things. And as things have progressed, I originally started working with people that were managing unhealthy and toxic relationship spaces and helping them to be more confident in those. And then I decided last year, after the first lockdown, really had quite a lot of inquiries from people that were single during lockdown and were really struggling being on their own and wanted to understand why they were by themselves and why they'd never be able to find the right type of person in their lives. And started to shift my focus towards helping people to find healthy relationships rather than people that were struggling that were already in them. And that's where we came up with the kind of relationship guy. It's to help people to find the quality of relationship that they're looking for.
Fantastic. So where do we start with, healthy relationships 101?
The most important relationship you're ever going to have is the one you have with yourself. So that's a good place to start. Generally, the relationship issues that we struggle with internally are the ones that are going to become external. And we're going to attract and be attracted to certain types of relationships based on what's going on for us. So if we have unhealthy relational beliefs or kind of avoidant patterns, attachment issues, if we're telling ourselves constantly the things that we don't want in people, we have a tendency to keep finding them. And everything that we kind of bring to ourselves is what will happen in the relationship. So if I have difficulty because I'm a lack of communication, I'll find a relationship which needs generally more communication to happen. But it's about understanding ourselves is the first step. And while you understand yourself, the big benefit of that is it helps you to understand everybody else. Once you understand why you're thinking, feeling and doing what you're doing, you can then take a step back out of yourself a little bit and a little bit out of relationships and say, okay, if I'm doing this for this reason, why might this person be doing what they're doing? And it helps us to kind of really understand the workings of other people and then what we can do, what we need to do within those relationships in order to make them much healthier and work on a higher level.
Wow, interesting. So where are the majority of people going wrong then?
The people that struggle with finding these types of relationships, briefly before we came out, we talked about communication, and you made a very good point about communication. I think communication is always key. But communication is generally only at a good level if you have that awareness of what's going on. It's all well and good to communicate, but if you don't really understand what's going on for yourself, and maybe what's going on for the other person, that communication can be really difficult. We all communicate in different ways. We all have a preferred way of communication. So it's about, again, if you can understand what that is for you, then you can express that to the other person that you're trying to have the relationship with, so that they can communicate with you in the way that's most appropriate. And also you can then modify your kind of communication style to fit in with what they need. So by being able to kind of really, again, it's coming back to really understanding the way that you work, understanding maybe what your love language is. I don't know if you've heard of the 5 love languages.
No.
So we all have a preferred way of being loved. Someone showing us affection so that we know that they care. And that is either affection, such as physical contact, words, deeds, time. And now I'm going to get caught out because I'm on the spot on the 5th one. Whichever one that was our main one is the one that will mean the most to us. So if I like a lot of hugs and you keep telling me that you love me, I'm never really going to feel loved. Mm-hmm. But if your primary language is to say the words, then you're going to think you're telling me and expressing your love in a really positive way. But then if I keep giving you hugs and never telling you, then you're never really going to feel like I love you either. We all have like a balance of the 5, but then we all have a primary style that we prefer. So if I'm constantly buying you gifts, but actually what you really need is to spend some time with me. Oh, the other one's deeds. There you go. And it would come to me eventually if I wasn't thinking too hard. So if I buy you things, but actually you're not spending any time, we're not spending any time together, then again, you're not going to enjoy those gifts that I give you because it's not really going to mean anything to you, because what you want to do is spend some more time together. And I think I'm showering you full of love because I'm giving you all these gifts, but actually never giving you any time. And I'm never going to understand what it is that I'm doing wrong because we're not communicating that. We're not really aware what our own patterns are and what we prefer. So again, it does come back to kind of understanding what it is that I need and then being able to express that to somebody. Obviously, if you're single, knowing that as well is really good because you can then take that into your next relationship. But actually finding a healthy relationship can be a lot more difficult if you're holding on to difficult sort of relational beliefs and difficult relational patterns. So you might have learned as a kid that maybe you're unlovable or unworthy. Therefore, you then might have an avoidant type attachment issue, which means that when you get too close to someone, you don't trust these types of things. So therefore you shut down. Or again, if someone there might challenge you on certain things, again, if they're not meeting your needs, they don't know what your love language is, they're not communicating with you in the most appropriate way, you could then take a step back from the relationship because you don't really know how to express what it is that you really want or what you really need for order to be successful. So there's lots of different dynamics that could be playing out in a relationship, but the art of communication, being able to express what you want, what you need from somebody is key for it to be a success.
Wow. This relationship thing is quite complicated, isn't it?
That's why I love it so much. It's got so many things.
You kind of you need like a sort of a CV, don't you? What your love language is.
Yeah, it's definitely there's we're not taught any of this, are we, as we grow up? We're not taught how to do relationships. We learn from experience. So we have all of these experiences as we grow up with our parents and our siblings and school, and then whatever kind of comes our way, and then our brain makes up our mind how we're loved, how we're cared about, the things that we need, the things that we don't need, whether that's healthy or unhealthy or secure or insecure. And then we carry that mostly throughout our lives until we're aware of the fact that we're actually doing it. Sometimes we really, we can come across the right kind of person that fits, but generally the energy that we put out there is the energy that we receive. So if I'm looking for a specific type of relationship because that's familiar, then we will go searching for that. And if that's an unhealthy energy, then we'll always end up going around in those unhealthy cycles.
And is it like an unconscious behaviour?
Yes, it is. Yeah, it's all coming from somewhere in our sort of 7-year-old self, really. So that the kind of stuff that we learn up until we're around about 7 is usually kind of fixed at that age. So our ideas around relationships, and then what happens as we get older, we have a genuine tendency to keep repeating the same types of things, because with beliefs, they are kind of the most powerful thing that we ever have. They're the only thing that's powerful enough to override your survival instinct. So if people end up killing themselves, it's because they believe there's no other option. But we know that your primary instinct is to stay alive. So if you've got a belief that then overrides your survival instinct, we can see how powerful beliefs are. And unfortunately, beliefs always look to be made real. So because they're your truth. So whatever it is that's going on around you, you try and make it fit. So if my belief is I'm unlovable or I'm unworthy, then I'll go out and find relationships that prove that to be true. Obviously, if I've got a much healthier idea of who I am and what I deserve and the things I want in life, then again, my belief will look for that to be true as well. And we switch our brains on to find those things for us to make those beliefs our reality.
So consciously, where we are trying to attract maybe a better person, unconsciously, we could be undoing all that.
Yes, if you don't actually believe that you deserve it, or it's the right thing for you, or that relationships can be a specific way, then subconsciously your mind will tell you something else. So when I was growing up, and actually not just growing up, throughout my entire life, if I had a healthy relationship, my brain would tell me that wasn't the right thing for me. So I would then do something which would prove everything I believed about relationships, that they were unstable, that they were never long lasting, that I can't be loved consistently. So therefore I would then act in a specific way which made that happen. So in the past, I've been actually quite nasty to people because I was trying to push them away, because the only thing I knew was that at the end of a relationship, I would feel a certain way. And if that wasn't happening in the relationship I was in, I would then create that so that I could keep myself in the same space.
So it's that self-sabotage.
Massively self-sabotaging. You don't know how to allow something different. And your brain says, yeah, but this isn't right. This doesn't feel right for me. I need to go back to what I know. And then we have these other kind of ideas that you create a safe space as well for yourself as a child, as far as relationships are concerned. If they're can be quite damaging, then we need to make a little safe space. So we could sort of think that being by ourselves is safer than actually being with somebody. So when you get to a certain point in a relationship and it could be something really good, then your brain says, but this could actually cause you a lot of pain like it did when you were a kid. What's your safe space? Okay, your safe space is to be by yourself. So then you might self-sabotage. You then might do something which then makes you end up by yourself again. Or you might keep choosing people where you know you're going to end up by yourself. So therefore you keep repeating that pattern, and your brain says, I know exactly what I'm doing here. This is my normal, this is my safe. I don't really know how to or want to deviate from this. That's what we're going to do again. And then we just keep going around in circles all the time.
Wow. So how do you get out of those circles, that vicious cycle? I guess come and see you.
That would be my primary choice. There's a lot of work you can do on yourself. So it's about understanding, kind of reflecting back on who you are, your experiences. So in my book is based on my experiences, what I learned as I was growing up, and then how I repeated those relationship patterns. But it just didn't affect my relationships. It affected every area of my life as far as success was concerned. And then in the back of the book is like a 6-part program which people can work through themselves in order to kind of ask themselves similar questions to the ones that I asked myself, to kind of come to my own conclusions, which is what I put in the book. But it's about really that self-reflection. Is what problems do I experience as far as relationships are concerned, and then delving a bit deeper to understand why those problems might exist. So did I grow up in a family where I didn't feel loved, that they didn't really make time for me, that they gave me lots of presents, but they never really gave me any love. There were no hugs, there were no kisses, there was no affirmations, there were no encouragement. What kind of ideas might have I then come up with about myself because of that? And the importance, again, of your parents is that if it's something negative going on, you as a child cannot allow yourself to see your parents have faults. They are your survival mechanism. So for you to then say, there's something wrong with my parents, you then are very unsafe. You know, your survival is at risk. And therefore you internalize it all. So if it isn't my parents that are the problem, it must be me. And then we start to develop that negative sense of self. Obviously, if we're fed with love and encouragement and support, then generally we're going to grow up with a secure attachment because we don't have those concerns, and our brain learns that relationships can be very healthy. We deserve love, we want love, and then we can go out and find that as we get older. But if we don't, then we can't. And even now, when I speak to my clients, when we start talking about their parents, it can be a bit taboo. Nobody really wants to see their parents in a negative way, but it's not about then blaming your parents for how you feel. It's about understanding that this is how they might have behaved that then led you to feel a certain way. I've got a client I finished with recently, and she had very lovely parents. They very much loved her. She was an only child, but they also loved each other a great deal. So whenever they were showing each other affection, she would feel left out. So then she started chasing love, and she would play up to try and get the affection, even though that affection was coming back. She didn't realize that as a child. So then she ended up having relationships with guys as she got older, that she was very distant because she didn't trust love to be consistent. And then they would show her consistently that they cared about her. And then she would start to show them love in return. And then they would back off. So then she'd consistently chase these affections, and she'd let guys treat her like she didn't really matter, which is as she felt as a child. So she would recreate subconsciously those relationships with these people to re-engage with that child self that realized that love was inconsistent and was taken away from her as she saw it at any moment, even though the love was always consistent. Her parents always cared about her. They always supported her and encouraged her. But her brain had made up this story that because they loved each other, they didn't love her anymore. So it's not necessarily that your parents ever did anything bad or anything wrong. It's all about our perception as kids that lead us to develop these ideas.
So what about people who are who've been in longer term relationships and they are staying together, they do love each other, but maybe that love has dwindled? What kind of advice would you give to them?
So there's two different types of love that I like to talk about. One's the chemical love that we first experience when we meet somebody. So that's when your brain's telling you, is this a good person for you to mate with and have children? And yes, it is. So therefore, here's lots of hormones that make you feel like you're in love with this person. Which is very hard to recreate, because once your brain switches off those chemicals, it's quite difficult for you then to have the same amount going through you at the same time that can recreate the same circumstances you would have had when you first met. And then we move into this deeper love, this real connection with someone. It's not just based on the chemicals that are flowing around your system, but obviously you do get a chemical release when you see that person, when you're with that person, and it's about trying to sustain that a little bit longer. So to do things with people that you would have done maybe at the start, to pay them attention, to look after their needs, for them to look after yours, obviously, to know what kind of relationship you want, to make sure that you're communicating in the right way, that you are aware of each other's preferred way of being loved, because, generally when we meet someone, they are the focus of our attention. So we're paying attention to what they want, we're paying attention to how they feel, and we have the tendency to lose sight of that the longer that we're with somebody, because we become a little bit maybe, complacent. We just expect them to be there. We get stuck in a routine, and we stop showing that that kind of focus on them that we did at the very start. So it's very important, I think, that you do keep that going to a certain degree. Obviously, when you have families and you know, it's not in the honeymoon period and stuff, and other things are getting in the way, it's more difficult to do that. But as long as you make that time for each other, I would say on a regular basis, you know, that you actually suspend everything that maybe you want or you need for a certain amount of time, and in order to offer that to the person that you're with, so they feel valued, they feel special, and then that's reciprocated. I mean, that's a very healthy space for you to be in. If it's not reciprocated, it's a very unhealthy space for you to be in, and then we would need to check in about your people-pleasing tendencies at that point, which is another story entirely. But yeah, and Tony Robbins says you do it because you want to. So if I'm happy that you're happy, again, we need to just put people pleasing to one side for now, because that's an unhealthy way of being. But if it's like, you know, I'm happy, you're happy, so therefore I'm prepared to do this for you because I know it's going to put a smile on your face and make you feel better, then I'm getting a lot from that. And if I can put myself into that mindset that I'm getting a lot from this because you're happy, rather than I'm giving this to you, what am I going to get in return? Or why should I bother doing that for you because you don't do anything for me? The giving to get is a very negative energy, but a giving to give is a very positive energy, because we're just doing it because we want to. And I think that's a key thing when you're actually in a relationship, and also when you're looking for a relationship, is to know what you want, which is a question that a lot of my clients really struggle with.
Knowing what you want. So what do you mean by that?
Generally, if I ask my clients to write a want list, they can come up with a massive don't want list. I don't want this. I don't want that. I don't want them to behave like this. And unfortunately, if we do that, we keep finding those types of people.
So we attract what we want to avoid.
Exactly. So when we're talking about the kind of law of attraction, if we're looking for something, we'll find it. So if I go to the park and I'm looking to avoid dog poo, what am I looking for?
Dog poo. Exactly.
So that's all I'm ever going to find. I might miss the birds and the trees and the playground, because I'm too focused on the thing I don't want. I don't want to tread in that. So therefore I need to keep looking for it. But that's going to be the focus of my attention. So I'm going to miss a lot of the other stuff that goes on around me. Whereas if I'm going to look to go and get on the swings and have a slide or whatever, I might occasionally tread in some dog poo when I go to the park. Hopefully not, because people bag it now and put it in bins. Like when I was a kid, that never happened. Yes, we're going to maybe occasionally tread in it, but we can wash it off because there's so much other stuff that we've got going on in our lives. You know, I can see the trees, I can see the flowers, I can hear the birds. So therefore, treading the occasional dog poo is not going to do you any harm, and you can move on. But if that's our entire focus, and then we tread in dog poo, we're going to be annoyed. We're going to, be disappointed. We're going to say, "Oh, I've been trying to avoid this, and this is what I found. Look what's happened to me," And but that's because you're looking for it all the time. And that's the same with relationships. If I'm always looking for what I don't want, that's what my brain is focused on finding. And there's a specific part of your brain called your reticular activating system, or your RAS for short. And that is if you want it, I'll go look for it for you part of your brain. And that's where I believe the law of attraction comes in, as well as putting your energy in the right space. So generally, the energy you put out is the energy that you attract. But if I'm saying to myself, this is what I want, my brain switches a part on it and says, well, if that's what you want, I'm going to try and help you to find that. If you say, this is what I don't want, your brain will say, well, that's what you don't want. I'm going to try and help you to find that too, just so you can avoid it. But actually, you're not avoiding it. You only keep finding it all the time. And then if you've got a damaging kind of negative relational belief or relational pattern, and then your subconscious says, oh, look, there's that thing you don't want. That reminds me of every other relationship we've ever had. I'm very comfortable with that. Let's go and ask them for their phone number. So it's about trying to understand that process for yourself and creating a different outlook and a different focus for what it is that you actually want from your relationships.
And then the Venus and Mars thing, what do you make of that?
Yeah, so There's a few studies recently which have said that the male and the female brain are identical, but I'm also kind of confused by the ones that say they're actually wired quite differently. There is a tendency that the female brain connects better than the male brain, so the two hemispheres connect. So that's why women have a tendency to be able to do and be in certain spaces that men find it difficult to get into. They're wired slightly differently, so that there is a more of a nurturing companionship, group kind of mentality as far as women are concerned. Again, we know that some of that's down to the way we evolved as human beings, depending on what your beliefs are. But you know, the women were they stayed in the groups, they looked after each other, they looked after the kids, they did the kind of the berry picking and stuff like that, and it was a very kind of communal space, whereas the men were off hunting and being aggressive and, you know, maybe slapping each other on the back and whatever it might be, stereotyping that I can think of at the moment. But it was a very different way of behaviour, and so therefore how the way that men think, the way that women think, that we've evolved in different ways. So there is something to that. But if I'm interested enough in you, I will take that space backwards and say, okay, what is about, how do you tick? What makes you work? What do you like? What don't you like? If I care about you enough, am I in a space where I can make that your reality, to kind of to feed what you need? And again, reciprocal. It always needs to be reciprocal. But yeah, we are different. There's no getting away from that. But it's about coming together with those differences so that they don't end up driving us apart or creating too many problems.
And new relationships. So you've talked about how you coach people to find the right relationship. So once you maybe start out on that journey, how do you make sure that it is a healthy relationship?
Yeah, so I think it's about keeping an eye out for your behavioural patterns and the people that you would have a tendency to attract, and being aware of those. Call them red flags, maybe. So are there things, if there's something wrong at the beginning of a relationship, it's probably never going to be right. We have a tendency, because of the hormones and the being in love type of thing, we have a tendency to overlook those at the start, because our brain's in like fuzzy mode. And we think they're endearing to start with, but become annoying after a short amount of time. And it's just important that if there's a fundamental issue going on for you, then the relationship's never going to be healthy. If you're arguing within, you know, a few weeks of being with somebody, those arguments aren't just going to stop. If they've stopped trying to please you, in, again, putting people pleasing to one side, if they've stopped trying to make you happy quite soon into a relationship, then again, that's very unlikely ever to get much better. So it's just to be aware of the things that you don't like in it for yourself, and nipping that in the bud as soon as you possibly can, rather than allowing your brain to go, oh, this is very familiar, I'll run with this. If it doesn't suit what you actually really want from somebody, it's okay for you to walk away from that. And we just need to, again, recognise that it is okay to walk away. I had a client who wouldn't walk away from people because she was frightened of hurting their feelings. But that was just what she was placing onto them. If someone was to have done that with her, it would have hurt her feelings. She would have felt rejected because she struggled with rejection. So therefore, she thought they would feel rejected, even though she didn't actually really want to be with them. So she ended up going through these relationships with people, sometimes for like 2 or 3 years, because she didn't want to reject them, because she couldn't cope with the idea of rejection. But actually, it's okay to say, look, we don't get on. This isn't for me. Thank you very much. It's been lovely knowing you. Goodbye. And it's okay for you to do that. That's your choice. And you don't need to worry about how someone else is feeling, because you're not responsible for how they feel. They're responsible for how they feel. If they don't like it, then that's okay. You can apologise if you want to. But hopefully, if you've done it within enough time and you haven't gone, it's not dragged out for too long, then the connection isn't that deep enough for them to be too concerned about it. And then I said, here comes my cat.
Someone's asked a question. Has John much experience with grey divorce when couples struggle to cope when they retire and have to spend more time together?
Yeah, so that's about getting to know each other again, really, because your focus has generally drifted from your relationship to your family. If you've had a family or your work, and therefore you're not used to spending quality time together or any time together. And again, it's just about getting to know each other again, that you need to be able to understand what the needs are. Again, kids can be your purpose in life. Your work can be your purpose in life. If that's no longer there, then you can have a sense of loss of purpose. So therefore, it's about kind of finding yourself a new purpose as you get older, and maybe something you then can share as a couple. But again, you could have just grown apart too much for it not to be a functional relationship anymore. And I know it's difficult, but it's no hardship to walk away. If it doesn't work for you, it doesn't work. And it's about being honest about that. And it depending if you want something else in your life, or whether you're happy just to be in that kind of mutually friendly space, agreeable space, doing things together, enjoying each other's company. Again, depending what you're looking for in a relationship as you get older.
Yeah, I mean, I can equate to that. I left a 30-year marriage, so we just grew apart.
Yeah.
And I felt I had to do the next stage of my life on my own terms.
Yeah, definitely. Again, it worked for maybe the time, for a certain amount of time. But again, we also, we need to check in. I mean, I've got a client at the moment, and she's very masculine in her energy, and her husband's very feminine in his energy. And she chose him because her dad was very masculine in his energy, and she didn't want to be with anybody like her dad. He had a masculine mother, so therefore he wanted to be looked after and told what to do, and didn't really want to take any responsibility for anything. They've now been together for 15 years, and she wants someone to look after her. Because again, when we look at our evolution as human beings, generally the feminine energy likes to be cared for and looked after. And if it goes against what our natural kind of state really is, we might have learned to be masculine, we might have learned to be feminine, but that might go against actually what's really good for us. So after 15 years, she's trying to get him to take more responsibility in their relationship, and he's like, no, but I still want you to look after me. So therefore, she's trying to shift a bit more into the feminine to be cared about, because again, it's about safety, emotional safety. She doesn't feel like he can look after her emotionally, and she's looking for him to step into a different space to make her feel secure. But now he doesn't want to do that. So she's decided the best thing for their relationship after 15 years and 2 kids is for it to come to an end, because she's tried to engage him in a different process, and he just doesn't want to shift. He's happy. So he'd rather separate than change his behavior. And that's what happens, unfortunately, with, I think it's statistically about 87% of the population. They are happy to stay in the space that they're used to. Then I think there's about another 5% that know there's something needs to change, but then don't do anything about it. And then the rest of the people have a tendency to go, okay, I know there's something I need to do, and then varying degrees of success on how much they do change their lives. He's in the 87%. He doesn't want to change his life. He's quite happy with everything the way that it is, and he'd rather let the relationship go than change who he is, and step out of his space to make the relationship a success. And there's nothing she can do about that, because he's not prepared to come along for the ride. And if that's the case, then it's about them thinking, okay, what's the best thing for me to do? Do I want to be in a relationship where I'm unhappy and I don't get my needs met, and likely never will? Or do I want to walk away from that?
Next question for you. How long does the honeymoon period last?
Depends how long your chemicals are switched on for. It's generally between 3 and 7 years. That's why there's a 7-year itch generally.
Oh, right. And if you're aware of that, it's okay.
Yeah, it's okay. If you're aware of what the change is, then you can deal with the change. If all of a sudden the honeymoon period is over, then you will be in a bit of a surprise. You will wonder what's going on. Why don't I feel the same about this person anymore? And again, that's when people, they might go and find someone else because they're looking for the same chemical hit again. They want someone to trigger that off for them. Again, it's a little bit more complicated with that because of attachment styles. So some people, it can be as short as, they're fighting against that. So when I used to really struggle, I would be with somebody, I would tell them I loved them one day and then wanted to walk away from them the next, because my chemicals were telling me that I was really into them, and then my avoidance would kick in and saying, yeah, but now that means you've told them you love them now what you can do. Now you're scared, but you want to run. Everybody's different, and it depends what's going on in the background. But yeah, it's generally, the studies suggest it's between 3 and 7 years, but everybody has that different level. It depends when your brain decides that you're comfortable and you've done what you need to do in order to mate with that person and have those children moving forward.
Okay, I have to mark 7 years in my diary then.
Just be aware.
Before we go into questions, have you got 3 tips that you'd like to leave our listeners with?
Okay, so first of all, I would say really look in the mirror. Everything about healthy relationships starts with yourself. So if you're not having healthy relationships, or there are issues in your relationships, it's always good to look at what your responsibilities are. When I separated from my wife, the first thing my coach said to me, do you understand your responsibility for this breakdown? And I went, yes. But that was the first thing they said to me was, do you understand your responsibility? Even though there were things that were going on which weren't my responsibility, she was adamant that I looked at myself first, so that I could then put myself actually in a more, I don't know how to describe it. It's more of a control space, more of an aware space, more of a less victim space, to kind of understand where I was within all of this and if I could have done anything differently, rather than going into the blame game and feeling bitter and, again, victim and all that kind of stuff. So again, looking in the mirror is one key. So understanding how you tick, what it is that you want. Communication is key to a healthy relationship. To be honest with one another, I think it's really important that there's honesty, trust, respect, and that all comes from being able to be expressive with someone and be honest and tell them the truth and communicate that with them, and to be really mindful of how the other person works. It's not all about you in a relationship, but it is kind of. But it's about making their needs important enough to you for that to warrant the effort for you to put in, if effort's the right word. But for you to say, this makes me happy that you're happy, and I want to do that because of that. Again, I keep referring to just putting to people pleasing to one side, because that's a massively unhealthy space. So if you're just doing it to meet your own needs, such as to keep other people happy, then you'll never be happy. And the relationship will never be what you want it to be, because you're always putting someone else's needs before your own. And eventually you're just going to run out of emotions and strength and resilience, because you're never going to get anything in return. So just be mindful of that if you're giving to somebody and it makes you feel, it gives you some pleasure doing that, we just need to make sure that is a healthy space that you're meeting, rather than an unhealthy space.
Wow. Okay. So has anybody got any questions? So you can either type them in the chat box or unmute yourself. Tim.
Hi. Thanks, John. That's really interesting, actually. A quick question, if I may. Have you seen an uptick in business following the lockdown, with couples having to put up with each other stuck in the house?
It's been very mixed, actually. It's not been more of an uptake, no. Not for what I do anyway. But I have had some couples that have actually been much better because they've spent more time together. So therefore, a lot of the issues that they were having, they were able to resolve because they were actually in each other's company a lot more. because I was dealing a lot with the toxic and unhealthy spaces, it's also been very hit and miss. So some people have had to spend far too much time in an unhealthy space. But generally when that happens, there's more than likely one person that doesn't want to come for help because they're getting the benefits of the relationship the other person isn't getting. And on the other hand, I've had people that have been able to spend time apart because they've been in lockdown and not been able to see these people, and they felt much, much better. And it's been a massive realization for them that actually that person doesn't bring me any joy. So therefore, when lockdown's over, I'm not going to see them anymore. But no, not necessarily. I think there's a lot of unsurety around at the moment about what people's financial situations, where this is actually all leading. I think when we come back to some kind of freedom and we're able to get out and about, I think there'll be a lot more people making decisions about what's been happening over the past year and whether their relationship actually does work or not. But I think there's a lot of people waiting to see what happens before they actually make this type of decision.
Can I just say one thing just before you move on to the next question? You know, so you look a little bit like Blofeld there with your cat, stroking your cat.
Let me put her over it. I'm not the villain. I am after a bit of domination, but not well. Sorry, Rachel, you're on mute still. And you're still on mute.
Shall I go anyway? You're still on mute. John, can you hear me?
Yes, Mark.
Right, okay. It was quite interesting. There's some interesting stuff there, and there's a couple of people that Rachel knows both of these people actually, and one's a very old friend of mine, and he's a perennial bachelor, and not that he hasn't had relationships, but I think he's got to a stage in life where I'm just wondering where this is a common theme where just can't be bothered anymore, and you know, he plays his golf. He goes down to the rugby club and he's got friends. It's not that he's not a loner by any stretch of the imagination. But you know, I just don't think he could be bothered. Conversely, there's another friend, actually a friend of Rachel's, and she won't mind me saying this. But what you mentioned about people saying what they don't want when they go dating. This particular person is very prescriptive about what they must, or what a prospective partner must have. So overly the top that really nobody, in my mind anyway, in their right mind, is gonna go there, you know.
Yeah.
And this interest, this disconnect that you get, you know, with people who won't compromise. They're looking, but they won't compromise. And somebody is probably just sort of, sorry, I'm happy enough, and I'll just go on, you know. Just interested in your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I would suggest there's some sabotage at play there. They're setting a far too high expectation, so therefore they're never going to find it. And that could be an avoidance technique, a lack, you know, don't really know how to commit to the relationship, so they're looking for reasons not to have the relationship, and just setting that bar far too high, so nothing is ever going to live up to that ideal. So therefore they don't have to have a committed connection with somebody. Yeah, if someone's given up, it's probably because they might have some kind of negative relational pattern or belief at play. So therefore they're never going to find the right person. Like, again, it could be avoidance. So they're saying, oh, you know, I've given up now because I'm never going to find the right person for me. Again, they don't really know how to connect at a deeper level with somebody, or they just don't think that they're ever going to find the right type of person, so they keep finding the wrong type of people. Not everybody needs.
Or maybe they've come across this other person who's so far demanding that they've looked and said, well, if that's what it's like, then let's give it a miss, you know.
I'll just play golf.
Yeah.
At least that's only my own mind.
They're not connected, these two people, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, without me obviously speaking to them, I wouldn't know exactly what's at play, but yeah, it's likely that there's, you know, he could have just decided, you know what, I'm just better off on my own and I'm happier that way. But as a species that loves to connect, that loves to be in groups, that loves to be, you know, we need love. That's one of the fundamental things of when we're born, is that we need to be loved. It's not just about being fed and watered. I could go into details of a study that was carried out, I think it was in the 40s, and they took some children that were orphans, and some they gave love and affection and some they didn't, but they were all fed and watered. And the children that weren't given the affection and love, they became very withdrawn and ended up all growing up with difficult relational experiences because they didn't receive the love and affection and the attention that they needed when they were first born. So it's very critical for us to have that, to feel safe, because if we don't feel like we're cared for, our brain goes into meltdown. Like if I'm not cared for, the likelihood is I'm going to die. It's like when you watch those nature programs and there's like a chimps and there's one on the outside and they say, we're very concerned that she's on the outside tonight. We don't know if she's going to survive the night. And it's the same with us as human beings. If we are not looked after by the adults, then we are very vulnerable. Yeah. And we grow up with that kind of idea of that, again, that relationships just aren't healthy and very good for us, so therefore we do our best to avoid them.
Yeah, it's kind of frustrating because this particular, I'd love to find him a nice woman, and because I know he's a lovely guy, you know what I mean, and you just think, oh, sort of, why isn't it happening, But anyway. Yeah.
Well, if he wants to find a nice woman, then he needs to be open up to the idea of finding.
Well, that's true, actually. Yeah.
If he keeps saying that I'm better off on my own, that's exactly where he'll end up.
I'm sure we've all got friends similar. Anyway.
Another question for you, John. What is the title of your book and where can we get it from?
It's called The People Programme, which stands for, that's like an acronym for things. I don't think I've got a copy here today. It's on Amazon and other good book selling sites. It's also, you can get it, there's a link on my website. I've got a page dedicated to the book on my website, so you can read about the book, and then there's a link at the bottom to Amazon to order it.
And your website is therelationshipguide.com, yes?
No, it's not actually. There's a guy in New Zealand actually who's a relationship guide.
Oh, right, sorry.
So my original site, I do have a link, which is therelationshipguide.co.uk, but it's just johnkennycoaching.com.
That's right, yes. Apology.
Yeah, he's
I've been emailing you enough. And then somebody asks, do you help improve sibling relationships?
I don't, but I have done in the past. I've done mother and daughters, father and sons, brothers and sisters, brothers and brothers, because the dynamics of the relationships are generally pretty much the same. It's just about getting to, if there's problems, it's just getting under the underlying issues, and then people then being willing to work on the issues that come up in order to make those relationships more healthy.
Has anybody got any more questions? I think we've probably got time for one more question.
Yes, Rachel. Are there people who are truly self-contained? Because you read about people in books and so on, like explorers or whatever, hermits and so on. Mm-hmm. And they just really, their brain is wired that they don't actually need anybody else.
Yes, if they've, generally they're not going to be born that way, but they could have experienced something as children. Again, in the first 7 years, our brain is usually wired fairly much. I mean, there is, our brain is always changing, but our ideas about relationships and whether we're going to have some kind of avoidant or anxious sort of attachment is there by the age of 7, probably much earlier actually. And so yeah, their brain is wired in that space, and the defense mechanisms go in, or the spaces that are most comfortable will have formed by that point. And then as they get older, if that's something that they keep, a pathway they keep going down, then yeah, they're probably very happy in their own company and don't really need anybody else. But it's not a natural state for human beings to be in.
So if people want to get in touch with you, it's johnkennycoaching.co.uk.
.com,
sorry. So have all this prepared beforehand, and people can email you at
john@johnkennycoaching.com.
Okay, so for the recording, there will be a slide up. So thank you, John, so much. So if you've enjoyed this ZestCast, then please talk about it on social, at Wake Up with Zest on Instagram or LinkedIn, or just on Rachel McGuinness's LinkedIn, that's fine. Our next ZestCast is in a couple of weeks' time. I was trying to queue up all the links, and I've got the one for after that. So in 2 weeks' time, because I'll send you the recording of this, I'll send you the link for the next one. It's going to be Greg Harvey, and Greg Harvey is a personal trainer, and he's just starting up his own gym called the Gym Hub. And we're going to be talking about how to rediscover your fitness mojo without trying too hard. And then the week after that, we are going to be interviewing Peter Bracken, who's a former Irish international rugby player. And we're going to talk about what the world of work can learn from well-being in rugby. So that's going to be a great one. So if you want to keep up to date with our ZestCast and find out what our schedule is, just go to wakeupwithzest.com/speaking. And I'm just going to put the link in for the one about the rugby, one about personal training. I'll email you. But anyway, John, thank you so much for your time and for joining us today and really giving us an insight into our relationships. I think we've got a bit of homework to do. And everybody else, thank you so much for attending this afternoon. And as I say, I'll send you the recording out in the next day. Have a great rest of the day and see you on the next ZestCast. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, John.
Welcome.
Thank you. Bye-bye.